All right, so I'm going to do a little talk about how I learned to kind of start labeling people when I fence them. That being said, so by label, I mean like I can put people into categories. That way, I can at least have a plan when I start a match before having said fence said person. All right, or very quickly I can make an idea. That being said, right, uh, it will resemble a lot of what's in this book, Spirit of Epee. So if you don't want to read the book, don't. If you want to, go ahead. This is a good book written by a world champion. That being said, it does resemble this. So if you want to come at me for saying what's in the book, go for it. A lot of us have the same thoughts written in a different way. So I ain't gatekeeping information, but if you want, by all means, please go buy this book if you want to support the author. So if when we are fencing, so we're going to draw kind of a line in the middle here. Not bright enough. Let's draw this line here. So we have like a line in the middle, right? When in fencing distance. So basically when we cross this distance in the middle here, something has to happen, right? If I go past tip to tip, right? Right now, if Borel were to extend his arm, he'd be around here. If you were to extend and step forward, he'd be around the hand. And basically, once you get a little around the hand, past the bell guard, you can get to the body in one action. Like you can make a decision and hit. And basically, a lot of what happens is how we make those decisions and how we label people. So typically, there's very aggro fencers. Okay, aggro or aggressive. I call them aggro, and those are the people that once they cross this line, they typically want to attack, right? They're high decision making and high chance to attack, right? They're pushing. Okay, in the book it's referred to as conqueror. Mentally, I called it aggro or berserker if you play D&D or something. Now, level 2 on this, we have counter. Counter. So I cross this line, right? I go in. So in aggro, you're thinking like Borel, right? Fences like Borel. In counter, you're thinking probably generally Minobe or like Canon. But you obviously every good fencer is a mix of everything because otherwise you become predictable. So counter, a guy likes to counter, so you could think like I don't know, what's a paladin maybe. Anyway, you go in, right? Your goal is to go into that distance. So now that I've crossed that distance, right? I'm at the hand. If I can attack at a good distance, that means my opponent is at a good distance to attack, right? Thus, I'm entering that distance to invite my opponent to enter. Okay, so I'm a high assertion, but more unlikely to attack. So once I go in, my opponent is now decided that I'm close enough to hit, and I will hit him. So you're baiting. Think Canon, right? Boom, boom. Minobe, same thing. Generally, very French grip heavy styles are like this. Okay, so now counter. And then next up, we have the, let's call it, like mentally, I would call them like engineer, but let's say pressure. So you kind of build a hit. Pressure. So what happens with pressure is I will rarely enter the distance. I will wait. So it's the polar opposite of counter. I don't enter the distance, but when my opponent enters my distance, so let's say, even though it's Nikishin here, it's very unlikely. My opponent will enter this distance. They will go in. I will then attack into that. Okay, so that's another very French grip heavy style. I let them go in, then I attack. So it's low initiative, but I want my opponent to pressure me to attack. And then, last but not least, we have tank fencers, like Nikishin here, where we are generally low initiative and very low chance to attack. They're typically very, very, very defensive. In this way, I feel a lot of people start out in their fencing journey. Generally, people lean towards defense, and then it does kind of cap out early on because once people start getting good at attacking, it's hard to maintain. But if you stick with that style, it typically, as you mature up, this style can work. But obviously, every good fencer has has a mix, right? Like Borel, before the Olympics, or a lot of times, was very much expected to attack constantly as if he was missing his flight. And that made it predictable, right? So if I have an aggressive fencer, they always enter the distance to things. They are very susceptible to fakes, right? Or fake invite. Fake invite. Right? Because you know that when they enter that distance, you know that when Borel's going to enter this distance here, he's going to attack. So you can give, oh, look how good I am at 6. Maybe you'll change to 4. Right? Thus, tanks can absorb that pretty well, assuming that the aggressive fencer doesn't change their style. Assuming that they're always on the offensive. Very, 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 very susceptible to false information. Counter. Now, counter is very hard because the counter goes in and they want you to attack. So basically, they're going to have a lot of hard time against tanks because the tank will rarely give anything to you. So you're going to do a lot of work, and if you don't get that first touch, the tank's sitting on it if you're not willing to attack. Right? So very, 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 like, it's going to sound like tank is like the best style ever. However, it's got its own limitations. And then if I'm a pressurer, right, I like to push in. I'm either pressuring, but I'm not. I'm never passing this line. Like, the line doesn't change, right? We're always here. I'm waiting for the guy to come past this line to go in. Well, that means if my opponent never takes initiative, I will eventually just lose out because I won't be able to enter the distance, right? So there's always combos that work well. Pressure with counter, aggro with pressure, tank with aggro, right? And obviously tank, I'm never going to cross this line, and I'll rarely take an initiative. That means I'm just waiting for them to enter, and I'm going to wait. So basically that means if I fall behind, I'm in a lot of trouble. So let's look at some examples. Tanks, very susceptible. Typically, they'll be susceptible to counters or pressures, but it all depends on the patience, the level of both fencers. So let's have a quick look at things like that. So here, we've got Borel fencing Nikishin. Right, so here, see, oh, so that's the thing. Here, look, so here we're in tank mode, like Nikishin. Nikishin's backing up, right? We've kind of crossed, and then, see, Borel enters the distance for us. We close in, back. It doesn't necessarily have to be parry. It doesn't have to be a lot. And keep in mind, right, this is in the first period only. Borel does not have to be rushing like this in this kind of match. So Borel is going in berserker mode, right? He's always entering. All right, and Nikishin absorbs. Thus, because that's predictable, Nikishin can take his time, right? Even though in this match, I believe Nikishin started down. What can make a good tank very deadly is the fact that they're able, like, because you're expecting nothing, their simple attacks can come out really out of nowhere, which I believe he will do soon. So here I see Borel, he's pressuring, he's in berserk mode. Boom, right? He's entering to punish or to attack. But you see here, because Borel is not expecting Nikishin to attack, Nikishin can get away with some little jabs here. Again, he's attacking. Right, and then see here, out of his comfort zone, Nikishin decides to go for an ill-fated attack, and he's in a lot of trouble. So he starts going back. Tank mode. See, he's absorbing. He knows Borel is going to keep going. Keep in mind, this is, I believe, Yannick Borel circa 2019, right, before the Tokyo Olympics. And you see, he's still on the attack. He's trying to finish this bout. And you see, Nikishin knows Borel's going to attack. What can he do now? Well, because he's seen as he can go in on his own. So this is more of a pressure style hit. See, Borel enters. Boom, and then we go. Not the cleanest thing, but obviously, right, this helps. So all of these just to help you visualize, right? You can label people into 4 groups, and you can kind of know or have an idea how you're going to fence. And see here where Borrell is back. That means this was a year ago or so, in 2024, when he was super hot. Now, all of a sudden, Borrell was able to mix his styles. This is more of a pressure hit, right? So, pop, pop, right? Siklosi loses his turn. Boom, get hit. And see now, unlike how he was 4 years ago, now he's just completely waiting, tank mode. Right? He's able to be versatile. Ooh, and you see there, so what is this? Pressure, because Siklosi enters the distance, boom. Right, and a lot of this is relative to the perspective of what you're watching, right? Am I watching this from Borrell's perspective or Siklosi's perspective? This last hit goes both ways, right? Was it this one? See, like, Siklosi here would be more counter style because he's entering the distance to get the other guy to go. And Borrell is waiting for the guy to enter the distance to go. So who's who, right? So now this is a beautiful pressure hit. And you see, oh man, this is just such a nice hit. And watch this, in bouts too, when people open the distance, there's a good chance someone has to do something. Boom, see? The distance has been entered, which Siklosi uses to launch. Like, this is not an insane launch, right? Just a beautiful launch. Or then we can watch Nick Zhang Minobe. Nick Zhang, who famously likes the pressure a lot. So you see here, right? Nick Zhang tries to go in. See, look, the distance has been crossed. We can probably draw a line here, right, around the tips. The distance has been crossed by Nick Zhang, which sets off Minobe to attack. Which that would be a pressure hit. And then here, now we're a bit more tanky, right? We're just, but it depends how we look at this. So here, I would actually almost consider this counter because we went in, bop, and then that set our opponent to go, so we actually get it back. And then there's here, if allowed to go full berserker mode, boom, no chance, right? Or again, another more interesting approach. Go deep. I enter the distance very vigorously to get my opponent to go. Okay, so long story short, let's paint. Long story short, we go into paint. I have, let's turn up our font. Can I turn up the font? Aggro, label it how you want, or berserker. Actually, let's do something else. So there's also a graph we can make. All right, so let's draw it out. So let's make our graph. So this one will be initiative, so willing to like initiate. See, Tiv. Right? And here is chance to chance to attack. or odds to attack. Chance to ATK. And then initiative. So basically initiative, think of it as I might enter the distance. So that means high initiative, high chance to attack. We have aggro, berserker. High chance to attack, low initiative. Pressure slash mentally I call that engineer, but that's because I play too many games. And then on the downside, we have low initiative, low chance to attack. That would be tank. And then high initiative, low chance to attack, counter. For some reason I called it wizard just because in games you have different anyway, resistances with elements. Anyway, so label this how you want, right? So if I have, so once again, aggro berserker. So how do we deal with that? So what's good about that, or what's good or bad? It's generally predictable, if not varied. Give false information. So now I know I have a guy who's aggro, so I know he's going to be predictable, so I can give false info based on what I want to do, right? I personally like to counterattack, or I like parry 8, parry 6, right? So I will do everything to either get you to fall into that or make you think I'm bad at that, right? Or you like squat, whatever you want to do. Now, I have an engineer pressure, which means they want to attack, but only if I enter the distance. That means I will take care when entering. And then we need to see, right? You can enter and see how they attack. You have choices, right? That person wants to attack you when you enter the distance. Give it to them slowly, right? And then we have a guy who has a lot of initiatives. That means he's going to enter constantly. He's going to be annoying, like a bee sting. Maybe El Sayed, right? So that means you know he's going to enter. He will enter a lot. Enter distance a lot. Right? So there's things you can do. We can hide the distance, like hide our hand maybe. Hide distance at first. When they enter, give false hope when entering. Because now, right, you can blatantly show, right? He enters, like, hey, look at my hand. And then next one he's going to go, maybe you can take 6, what have you. You have chance, right? Whatever it is. Give false information when entering. Now, typically, this is the one a lot of people struggle with because beginners go here usually. Why? Because they don't know how to make decisions yet, and that's super normal. Beginners, or generally the relatively lower ranked fencer. Ranked fencer goes here, right? The relatively lower ranked fencer will go here, which means, right, a lot of times, a lot of people tell me, well, I keep losing to fencers that are quote unquote worse than me because they're not doing anything. You have to do all the work. And then the answer to that is, well, there's a tank. They're predictable. They're going to wait. They're rarely going to attack, which means you can take your time. Right? There's like also probably like skill charts, right? Where like skill ceilings. So basically, if you're giving them, they don't want any initiative. They don't want anything. If you're constantly trying to pressure them and attacking them, you're actually falling into their comfort zone. However, if you yourself tank back up, so you really take your time on that first hit, you do not rush it, and then you force them to fence, you force them out of their comfort zone, you go in, out, maybe you show false information, they'll be forced to try something else. Work extra hard. When I have a tank, or generally, right, because obviously I have kind of GP aura, right? People tend to respect me more than they should. A lot of people fall in here, especially when they first meet me. Which means they control the skill floor. But you can get them out of that. Work very hard for first point. All right, so the first point means a lot because that dictates. They get to dictate the early match until proven otherwise, based on, right, if the skill level is not that outrageous. Okay, so you'll work hard for your first point and you'll force them out of their comfort zone. Eventually, they'll show their side. So anyway, if you enjoyed this TED Talk, please like, comment, subscribe. If you really want to, check out Rémi's book. And otherwise, if you like videos like that, I can make more. So thank you for watching. Have a good day.